Today's reading is The Law of Karma, Bondage or Soul Release. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The epistle of St. Paul to the Galatians contained this oft-quoted statement: "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa tells a story from the life of the Benares saint Nayaswami. A skeptic once determined to expose Trilanga as a charlatan. A large bucket of calcium-lined mixture used in whitewashing walls was placed before the Swami. "Master," the materialist said in mock reverence, "I have brought you some clabbered milk. Please drink it." Trilanga unhesitatingly drained to the last drop the container full of burning lime. In a few minutes, the evildoer fell to the ground in agony. "Help, Swami, help," he cried. "I am on fire. Forgive my wicked test." The great yogi broke his habitual silence. "Scoffer," he said, "you did not realize when you offered me poison that my life is one with your own. Except for my knowledge that God is present in my stomach, as in every atom of creation, the lime would have killed me. Now that you know the divine meaning of boomerang, never again play tricks on anyone." The well-purged sinner, healed by Trilanga's words, slunk feebly away. Yogananda goes on to say, "The reversal of pain was not due to any volition of the master, but came about through unerring application of the law of justice, which upholds creation's farthest swinging orb. Men of God realization, like Trilanga, allow the divine law to operate instantaneously. They have banished forever all thwarting cross-currents of ego. Not by reason alone, but by self-realization, are the ins and outs of destiny fully understood. Their web, though tied forever to the post of ego motivation, is too intricate to be perceived as a single thread. Only great masters can see it with clarity. It is visible to them in all its workings, not from within the tangle, but from above in superconsciousness. As Sri Krishna said in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, "He who beholds inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among men. He is one with the Spirit. He has attained the true goal of action, perfect freedom." Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om. Om. Om.
Hello, everyone. Oops, am I on? Okay, good. Thank you for joining us today. We actually have more people than I thought, so thank you, Mary, for not letting me take down all the chairs. So, this subject of karma is a vast one, and in fact, when I was preparing yesterday, I became a little bit overwhelmed. So I actually have like 6 pages of notes. And I got to the point where I had to sort of discard them. So we'll see what pops out, what Divine Mother's going to bring out of me today. So the title is Karma, Bondage, or Soul Release. And I guess the first thing I'd want to say about karma is that the word karma literally means action. And it refers to, in this case, any action, both physically of thought or of desire. And that binds us to this false sense of ego as being who we are. And the other thing I want to say, one of many things about karma, is that, it's so tempting in life to think that what comes to us that we are not looking for has somehow been thrust upon us. But the truth, as this reading points out, is that everything that comes to us is something that we have created in some way. And so the right understanding of that is important for our spiritual growth. And I love the image of the boomerang because it's gives us such a clear sense of that. We throw something out, but the trouble is, or from our perspective, the thing is that it may take lifetimes to come back to us. These karmas, these energies that we put out, that we initiate, that we start rolling, start moving, have to come back. It's a big cycle. And it's a law of the universe that works and operates perfectly and can work to our advantage if we are able to see it and work with it in the right way. But sometimes it takes lifetimes for those seeds to germinate, to find exactly the right conditions in which to sprout. There's a fun story in Yogananda's teachings. Yogananda, author of Autobiography of a Yogi, soon to celebrate its 70th year of publication, one of the most beloved spiritual books in the world, read by millions and has changed millions of lives. A little commercial there. You'll hear about more about that next week. But in some of his lessons, he had a story that I've always loved that Prem Shanti, one of the ministers who was here for years, often used to tell. So in honor of her, I'm going to tell a very short version of this story. So it's Mr. Sham and Mr. Honest. And so we see these two friends in India who lived side by side in the same house. And they'd known each other probably as boys. I'm embellishing here a little bit. But they, in a way, were polar opposites. Mr. Sham, as you might get from his name, lived a wild and dissolute life. He had a wife who was faithful, beautiful, humble, spiritual, accommodating, whatever someone might want a wife to be, loving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yet, of course, he cheated on her, treated her disrespectfully, and basically made her life a misery. He lived a licentious life. He was out carousing, drinking. His business dealings were such that he didn't care who he hurt. He, just lived what he called a natural life, basically doing whatever impulse came into his brain. He was cruel, you name it, you can stack up all the qualities, and yet, look at all he had. His business flourished, he was popular, he had this great wife, and there was his friend, Mr. Honest. Well, Mr. Honest was a spiritual seeker. He spent long hours in meditation. He tried to help everyone that he could. He tried to be so honest in his business dealings. And he tried to be good to his wife, who was, let's face it, not the world's most evolved person. She was mean. She snuck around behind his back. She treated him poorly, etc., etc., etc. So here you have these two side by side, and Mr. Sham starts needling Mr. Honest. Look at me. I live how I please, and you could do the same thing. And I'll introduce you, if you give up your ways, this meditation stuff, I'll introduce you to some people, set you up in business, you'll do really well, just like me. So Mr. Honest says, no, I can't live that way. I love God, go away, don't bother me with this. So some time goes by, and Mr. Sham starts becoming more and more insistent, and he corners Mr. Honest at one point, and he says, look, your life is a mess. I want to make a bet with you. You seem to think God exists. I know there's no law in the universe. And here you are, Mr. Super Special. You think you're Mr. forget how he said it, Mr. Super Special from a non-existent God. How can you prove to me that God exists? So here's where Mr. Honest kind of made a little mistake. He said, well, I know God exists and I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to pray for 90 days and then we'll see what happens at the end of that time. Maybe it was a month. Actually, it was a month. And so Mr. Sham says, what do you mean? Mr. Honest says, well, you just wait. So they made this deal. If things went well for Mr. Honest and poorly for Mr. Sham would give up his ways and start to meditate and lead a life of virtue. And Mr. Honest said, well, if things go the opposite way, Mr. Sham said, if things go the opposite way, you have to give up what you're doing. And Mr. Honest kind of agreed. So this whole thing took place for 30 days. On one side of the house, carousing, natural living, and on the other side of the house, intense prayer and meditation. And Mr. Honest was saying to God, please, prove me right. I know you're there. Make some good things happen for me so that Mr. Sham sees this. Well, at the end of the 90, I keep wanting to say 90 days, at the end of the month, here's what happened. Mr. Sham was feeling pretty good. He'd been just doing whatever he felt, and he knew that things were going to go his way. He could just feel it in his bones. So he went out hunting, and he shot even more birds than he usually does. Stuffed them into a sack. In fact, he shot more birds than he needed, and he was just going to throw the rest away in this sense of, I can do whatever I want. Well, he got a little tired from shooting all these birds, so he laid down under a tree, pulled out his knife, and just started scraping at the ground. And what should happen, but he heard a little clink. So he keeps scraping. There's a chest there. So he scrapes some more, he brings it up, and in it is $3 million. So he's thinking, wow, things are going my way. So he goes home, and he kind of wonders what happened to old Mr. Honest. Well, Mr. Honest, prayerfully, walking across the street, gets hit by a car and is in the hospital. So Mr. Sham goes to visit him and says, here we are. I think I've proved my point. And Mr. Honest says, I can't believe that, even with this, that there's no God. And so I'm sorry, I can't keep my end of the bargain. I'm not going to give up my life as it is. You go ahead and do what you want. But what happens after but he gets kind of discouraged. He can't bring himself to follow Mr. Sham's life, but he feels forsaken by God. And so he decides he's going to end his life. So once he gets out of the hospital, he limps over to a nearby lake and he grabs a heavy stone, wraps it around himself, and he's about to cast himself into the lake, when this sage comes by and says, hey, Mr. Honest, what are you up to on this glorious God-given day? And Mr. Honest says, God-given. And how do you know my name anyway? Well, I've been sent here by the Lord to tell you that everything that has happened to you in the past was as a result of your past bad deeds. You lived a pretty dissolute life, just like old Mr. Sham, but at the end of that past lifetime, you started to regret how you had lived. You started to understand the misery it had brought on others and your own inner misery. And so you decided in this life, you vowed before you left that life to lead a virtuous life this time. And he said, in 3 more days, that karma is going to be expiated. Just wait, trust me, things will turn around. And so he heaves a little sigh, and because he's been a lover of God, he wants to believe, and he says, okay, but can you tell me why it is that Mr. Sham has so much? And the sage says, well, in his last lifetime, Mr. Sham was a virtuous person, but he became disgusted at the end of his life because he was working off past bad karma, and things didn't seem to go his way, so he got discouraged. And he decided to give up this crazy life of seeking God and just do whatever he wanted. But he's been coasting on his past good karma all this lifetime. But you know what? For him, in 3 days, it's all going to run out. So you watch and see what happens. So, dear reader, you can imagine what happens at that point. In 3 days, Mr. Sham gets mysteriously ill, I think. I forget the rest of the story, but... and, he becomes paralyzed. Paralyzed, and his wife sickens suddenly, beautiful wife, and dies. He becomes paralyzed. The money that he hid underneath the floor gets stolen by his servants while he's there paralyzed and can't wash. He can't stop them, and he ends his life in poverty. Whereas Mr. Honest's wife leaves him, but he finds a virtuous and wonderful person to be with after that. Someone that in his family dies and leaves him a lot of money, and he ends up in comfortable circumstances and ends up helping Mr. Sham to reform. So there. At any rate, long story. It's even long in paraphrasing it. Sorry, that took almost 10 minutes. It's just such a fun story, though. And one of the points to that story is, of course, that we don't know how far back in our lifetimes the circumstances that we confront today have been built up. But what we do know from the teachings of yoga is that we have created them. And so we are our own, in a sense, lawgiver. We are the one who metes out whatever it's called, punishment or opportunity, is how we are counseled to see it with the teachings of yoga, that everything that comes to us in our lives is an opportunity to get off of this wheel of karma, to stop creating karma. You know, you can't stop acting. You walk out the door, you have to confront people. There's that fun prayer, Lord, I haven't insulted anyone or lost my temper at all today, but I'm about to get out of bed and I'm going to need your help after that. Well, we all know that we confront things in our lives all the time. Sometimes the circumstances seem wonderful. And even there, when we're experiencing the fruits of our good karma from the past, there's the temptation to then just think somehow that that's going to be sustained, that is something that we can coast through life with. And sometimes that makes us a little bit selfish. I was reflecting yesterday on the great philanthropists in the world. I'm thinking, and I don't really know much about his life, but of Bill Gates and his wife, and I'm thinking how wonderful that a person like that who's had so much material success is now spending the rest of his life giving it away, expanding his consciousness, taking the karma, the great good karma that he had built up over past lifetimes, and sharing it so that others might prosper. So that's one of the things that we want to do when we have good fortune. We want to expand our sympathies, and that's one of the ways that we go beyond karma, by identifying with the Creator rather than the creation. We sang this beautiful chant, "Oh God, beautiful," which talks about God in creation, but it ends with the phrase, "To the yogi thou art bliss." Everything in this life is there to help us to understand that what we're really seeking is something much deeper than the likes and dislikes, the personality that we tend to confuse with us. We're seeking our soul's bliss. And I don't know about you, but after a while, those fluctuating waves that we go through, good things and bad things, tests and surprises, ups and downs, it starts to take on what Yogananda called an anguishing monotony. And you just want to be free of it. It's not that you want to just escape your life, it's that you want to find something deeper, something more lasting, something that helps you to meet everything that comes to you in a way that's going to bring you closer to that sense of inner peace, of joy, of bliss. And so I want to cut to the chase now, because I always think, I was reading yesterday and trying to see if I could get in my mind all the different parts of karma so that I could explain them and make them clear. And after a while I thought, can't do it. What does it mean to me right here and now? Well, what it means is, what do I do? What do I do? What are some things that I can do and that I can share with others that help us to move beyond karma? So I'd like to share a few of those to start with. So when we think about bad karma, we often think of it comes from the habits we've built up over lifetimes. So one of the things that we can do when we find ourselves, I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but you walk into a situation and suddenly some kind of interaction assumes this sense of familiarity, like, oh no, here we go again. Or your own behavior assumes it's like, oh no, I'm making that mistake again. Well, one of the things we can do is to not identify with those mistakes, not identify with those bad habits, even when we're in the midst of them. To hold ourselves a little bit aloof, to be as though we're watching that take place. Because in fact, that is what's happening. The ever-present soul within us, that soul that's in contact with the divine, is watching. It's there cheering us on. It's there to say, no, you're more than that. Pay attention. Pay attention to intuition, to that little voice inside, to that niggling sense of doubt when you're about to launch into a reaction to something. Pay attention to that sense, that quavering sense of ill ease, which tells you you're on the wrong track. You need to, as Swami once said, Swami Kriyananda, Ananda's founder, relax back into the bliss of the chakras. In other words, relax back into who we are, into the spine, into that center of peace. And of course, how do we get there? How do we even know what that is? Unless we have some kind of a practice daily that takes us in there. And that's, of course, where meditation reigns supreme. Meditation, when we take the time to quiet our minds, to go inside, to just let go of everything on the outside for a minute and feel ourselves as a soul, we meet our soul, right? We have that experience. We go perhaps beyond the body, or we feel that sense of God's peace, or we start to feel an expanded sense of love that helps us understand on a deep level that we're connected to everything around us and that our actions do affect everything around us. When we start to feel that, the soul starts to grow. The ego starts to diminish a little bit in importance, and we start to feel who we really are. Pay attention to those moments, and then try and take that feeling out into your everyday life. Yogananda counseled that when you get up from meditation, consciously try and have that feeling just go out with you. See how long you can keep it with you. And you build up those meditation muscles, those feeling God in action muscles. That's part of what they're talking about here with that action and inaction, and inaction, inaction. A great master feels that all the time. They are so aligned with their soul that they understand that all karma actually comes from thought and from energy, and action is only the last part of it. Yogananda once had an experience in his guru's ashram where he was about to swat a mosquito, and he remembered the law of ahimsa, of non-harming, and his guru said to him, why don't you, finish the deed? You'd already struck the blow in your mind. Well, in our lives, we can't always, as he also went on to say, the world is inconveniently constructed, the physical world, for a literal practice of ahimsa. But we can hold that in our hearts so that even when we have to do something difficult that might hurt someone's feelings, even if we're called to go into battle, that we're doing it for the right reason, to defend rather than to attack, to uphold a principle rather than to just slay something. No matter what it is, we can hold in our consciousness that sense of unity, that sense of oneness with all life. Another beautiful one is to harmonize your heart. This is a great practice to do before meditation, to sit down and consciously calm the heart's feelings. We create a lot of karma when we see people as others and when we feel less than kindly towards them. But if we sit down in meditation and start by trying to harmonize our heart's feelings and then go into meditation and then come out with the resolve to be a channel of blessings. It's a wonderful way when things come at you that you don't like, or people come at you that you feel are trying to harm you or treat you ill. When you strengthen that energy of the divine and you become a channel for it, it's like creating a great force field of good. Great force field of good that protects you. To see with gratitude all that comes to us, because we have created it and it's coming back to us to learn from. That can be a tough one, admittedly, at times. But if we cultivate a ready sense of, I have a friend who just tries to automatically, no matter what happens, she thanks her guru. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. She's trained herself to have that phrase come into her mind. And so even though in a way it's rote, it brings to her mind that thought. You know, this is coming to me for my ultimate good. Yogananda's, one of his foremost women disciples, used to say to him, send me what is best. You know, when you think about that, when you think about everything as the best that's here for you to learn from, and then you approach it with a sense of inner freedom, with meditation, with trying to see the broader picture, with giving the ego opportunities to step aside, then we triumph. I think I want to just, one or two more things. Yogananda said that the ways of creating bad karma or karma are many, but that basically the ways back are very few. Just a few simple things. And the most important of them is love God. And what does that mean, love God? Well, it means to have our energy directed, our will directed towards the experience of oneness. You know, in whatever form is real and dear to you. God as the friend, God as the order of the universe, to be always hearkening towards that, to awaken, to cultivate this sense of yearning for unity with that, so that lesser things fall away. Lesser things are less important when you place them side by side. And then I just want to end with one more comment. We seem to have, as a nation, gotten ourselves into some interesting karma. And there is such a thing as mass karma, but the stronger we are in our own love, in our own personal good karma, in our own will to draw upon the highest, the less we're affected by that. So in a time which feels kind of divisive, make sure you keep your energy positive and uplifted. Don't succumb to the temptation to judge, to think we know the karmas of those who feel and act differently and hold things differently than we do. We don't know how they've been taught here to teach us, but we do need to stand up for that which we feel is right, but in the right way, in the spirit of love, in the thought of love, because ultimately it's that love which conquers all, which supersedes all. It's a law of the universe. It will come to pass for us. You know, we can take lifetimes if we want to, but the sooner we tune into that love, the more we'll experience it, and so will the world. I'd like to just end with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. I have two picked out, so I'm going to see which one. I think I'll do this one. O infinite alchemist, spiritualize our weaknesses into strength and our wrong thoughts into right thoughts. Grow thou a flower of divine understanding from every seed of activity. With the magic wand of foresight given by thee, teach us to transmute the ugly imps of selfish ambition into fairies of all-serving noble aspirations. Train, Lord, each stallion of desire to become a champion racing for thine abode. Transform our base ignorance into the gold of wisdom, that it become a liquid stream of a spiritual gold, rushing steadily to thy shore. Let's have a moment of silence.